Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mastermind Book Club, another session of an important book that we have recently listened to. This book, we have just listened to half of it, part one. This will be part one of summary of The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio, my coach, my financial idol, whom I seem to be learning so much more on how to make better investment deals just in general. And today, here we review our first part of this book. And I'd like to start out with Charles. Charles, are you ready?
Yes, how are you this evening?
Wonderful.
In the book by Ray Dalio, calling the New World Order, is that correct? The New World Order is the name of the book. It talks about the transition of economics in not just the United States, but in the world. But it focused on the United States because the United States, as we know, is the premier currency, which is the dollar. It is the world currency, and it talks about how different empires, such as the Dutch, such as Germany, such as Britain, they've all had their turn at being the world's currency or being the world's leader through trade and export. Now, what we're seeing in the history that Ray Dalio exposes us to is that each one of these has an inconsistency through greed, through over leveraging, through over borrowing, through extensive credit. And this is something we have to, as a country and as a people, sound an alarm about. It's very serious that we look at the money that's being actually printed. So right now we have $52 trillion in debt and credit that's floating out there, but we really only have 3 trillion in cash. Can you see the deficit in this? In 2008, we had a great uh, disparity in the housing industry. And this is an example that Ray Dalio is showing us that compared to what's coming, that will look like a little pimple of what's coming down the pike. The United States, if we don't take charge of this or take control of our spending, our borrowing, our infrastructure, put a cap on our greed, you know, uh, do something with the great divide, the diversity, we're going to implode just like the great empire of Rome, Dutch, the Germans, and the Britons. So the United States could become a third world country. So that's my spiel for this evening, and I'm gonna turn it back over uh, to um, to David and to Reggie.
Thank you, Charles, for sharing that. And in reference to what you said, in the last 5 to 600 years, what Charles just said is what has been happening. In 1500s, the Netherlands, the Dutch, were the world leaders. And
Yes,
then in the late 16, 1700s, United Kingdom became the leader. And then in the, what was it, the 18, 1900s or so, the US became the leader. Now, the leader of what? Well, on one end, they had more monetary power. And how did they measure that? They measured that usually through gold. Through gold is how it was measured. And gold can be found anywhere. There's a lot of excavations. Every now and then you'll hear about it, maybe near a dam, maybe in a mountain, maybe in an island, maybe in another country that you might be visiting. And the reality is that gold still seems to be the standard, but there is a different type of currency that's coming up, and that's cryptocurrency. Will cryptocurrency take over what the gold standard has been for many, many years? We don't know, but we do speculate that it makes it easier and more universal for everyone to just jump into crypto, and voila, the currency has been set to a standard that is understood by every country if they want to, because not every country accepts it. Now, how does Ray Dalio's information in this book, in the part one of this book, relate to what I'm saying? Because right now we're at a pinnacle where, number one, the U.S. has provided almost zero interest rates so that people can borrow money. And usually, countries and corporations borrow money at that rate. Bonds is one of the ways that they borrow. Now, when the rate becomes so low, what do you do to correct a country from beating inflation? Well, you can't do much in reference to lowering the interest rate anymore because it's already at zero or practically zero. And how can you make it any lower than that? Well, now Ray Dalio tells us that we have a possibility of meeting up with what is known as stagflation, a halt to the borrowing, a halt to the economic transactions that are being done worldwide through the current currencies that exist. And what happens if there is a halt? Well, we saw this halt back in the 1930s when Roosevelt, I believe, was the president, and then we saw it again when Nixon was president. But when they had their correlative speech, they said it in a way that sounded very nice and did not make a negative wording behind what they said. And basically, what they said was that they were going back to the gold standard. And when you listen to that, Ray Dalio in 1971, when he heard Nixon, thought that the market would crash the next day. I would have guessed the same thing. I believe the same thing. And sure enough, it did not crash. As a matter of fact, the market rose 20 to 30%. And we're starting to see some of these same types of trades in the current market. Why do I say that? Because I invest for a living right now. That's my main source of income. And the reality is that even if you do not think that you invest, yes, you do. When you go out there to buy from a specific supermarket or a specific store or buy gasoline at a specific gas station, you are investing your money. It's just that you don't see the return immediately or in the eyes of actual investors. And what Ray Dalio is trying to tell us is that we are in for a big doozy. The possibility of seeing our monetary system collapse is upon us. The Great Reset is what it is known as. This Great Reset could happen anytime in the next few weeks, maybe by summer, maybe next year, maybe in 2 to 3 years or more. But as long as there is war prevailing in certain parts of the world, and most people are providing, what are they providing? They're providing sanctions. And sanctions has been used in previous wars. And it's just a precursor to a more contradictory situation that can lead us to a calamity, that can lead us to bankruptcy, that can lead us to default on loans. I mean, look at right now. There's the president Biden has stopped people from paying rent. And what Charles just said in reference to real estate, we're looking at this all over again. There are a lot of places that are going to be defaulting on loans because people were told not to pay their rents. And that is in the making. How do you avoid that? I don't know how to avoid it except claiming bankruptcy, except not paying your bills. So expect this to happen. And what else could happen? Maybe some banks might default. I just saw an article saying one airline is getting ready to sell itself, which is Spirit Airlines, and JetBlue just made an offer. I don't know what other airlines are there. I just saw that and it stood out, meaning it's just another sign that things are getting tough for everyone. And if you're not careful and save some money, then things might get tough for you or people you know. So this is what I offer in part one on Ray Dalio, and I just wanted to see if anyone else had anything to say. from our team here before we shut down this recording. Reg or Charles, are you good?
Well, it's a statement that says the true test of government is how it carries out its policies. And that was, I believe, from Paul Volcker, who was an economist during the Nixon era. So we definitely have to, as a country, as a people, take stock in our own destiny and our own future by really investing in the politics of today and seeing that we stop printing money into thin air because that's what it's going to become. The money is going to devalue itself, and our debts and responsibilities will implode and and take us under. So it is a cry. It is a wake up call. Um, the Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, he's been predicting for quite some time that there's going to be, like you said, David, a great reset. Especially if we keep on the path that we're on.
Thank you. Thank you. Charles. I mean, Reggie, sorry. Reg.
No, I mean you guys touched on a lot of different points. I mean, I think one of the main things with Ray Dalio is he likes to study the history, and he does look at how there are many cycles and economic cycles in terms of how you have debt cycles, credit cycles, these different money cycles that basically last certain periods of time, and he uses that to extrapolate or to take into account what's going to happen in the current or in the future, and that's essentially how he does his assessment. But he does a very extensive study, and I think part of that, if you think about even like some of the prospectuses from like financial companies, this is past performance doesn't guarantee future performance, but in a sense, past history in some ways can give you a sense of what the future history is going or the future is going to be. So that's where because people, we're creatures of habit, and if you study your own past, you can see some of the formulations of the same things in your, in your now and going forward. So until you change some of those behaviors, as we can do, and which we're not necessarily doing, will we be able to see different outcomes come from that? And I think with the U.S., there's a bit of hubris, like excessive pride with respect to I'm bigger, better than everyone else, and we've been the standard of currency for the better part of 75 plus years. I think it was since the 1940s when we basically won the war, World War II. And so from there, I mean, we've been that standard, and we've kind of like stuck our chest out and walked around thinking, our doodle doesn't stink. But in essence, I mean, we, not keeping track of things. And, obviously we've taken ourselves off the gold standard back in the early 70s. So it's been the 50 years plus of that. So we're talking about just money in which you can print has been mentioned, just sort of print it without any backing, and ultimately leading to things that we see now like inflations and such, and hyperinflation and so on and so forth. And so ultimately you understand that like credit, not credit, but the money standard that we have, it only has a certain shelf life. And us being a superpower as well, a certain standard, I mean certain shelf life as it relates to the different, like money's always changing over time. So where we are in current, it's not like this is going to go on indefinitely. And at the same time, as I was speaking to us being this superpower and walking around with our chests out and no one can beat us, we've seen some cracks in our armor, and so we have to be careful. But I think sometimes when some of us walk around boldly like that as a country, there's a bit of like, this sort of like bravado and everything else that says, this is impossible for us to fall. And so, with some of those signs showing, I think even still with that, I think, America has this sort of attitude that, still impossible, still impossible. So, it's something we have to be wary of and something we have to keep our eyes on, because, it's definitely not an impossibility. And it's just something that as we go forward, hopefully we will change what we're doing, because as I mentioned, the past being what it is, showing us what is potential for the future, we definitely want to be on top of studying the past and seeing where we can make some corrections so that we can be better predictors of our future and maybe manifest a better future so that we don't fall off the perch, because that would not be something for this country that they would necessarily be willing or looking forward to, dropping from a number one superpower and number one in line in terms of all countries to like a number two or three or whatever, because we see the likes of the Chinas, potentially passing us up soon. and there are predictions in the next so many years, within like 10 years, I think it is. So we just have to be careful, and hopefully we start to just kind of correct what we're doing and move forward in a way where we're putting ourselves in a place to win, or staying at least where we are. So that's what I'll offer.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you,
Hmm.
Reggie, and thank you, Charles. The review has been amazing, and I'd like to thank our listeners for putting up with us on this amazing summary of the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. And until next time, when we'll review the second part of this book, this is the Mastermind Book Club signing off. Take care.